Hey guys, our devotion today is from First Kings chapter 1. We're beginning the book of First Kings today. We're going to be reading through it the rest of the month. Remember, a few months ago we read through Second Samuel, and so this is sort of carries on the story from where that one left off. And I think in today's chapter we really get to see the grace and the truth of God on display. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that we're going to be in prayer for WG and Maxine Anderson today. Anytime we read these stories in the Old Testament, it's sort of interesting. Not everything that we see the characters do in these stories is something that God would want us to practice in our own life. We get to see them at their high points of serving God, of seeking after God, and we get to see them at their low points when they do some pretty dumb stuff. And I think we're going to experience a considerable amount of dumb activity as we read through the book of First Kings. Here, we see unrest in David's family. You know, he's getting old. It's getting to that point where he can't really reign anymore. He's having trouble even getting out of bed. So it's time for him to appoint one of his sons to become the king. And of course, we know that David is sort of under this punishment, that there's going to be unrest in his family. The sword is not going to depart because of the mistakes and the sins that he made. And we see that, I think, a little bit here with another one of his sons. Remember, Absalom did this in the book of Samuel, where he tried to take the kingdom for himself. And now we have Adonijah, who has decided that he's going to take this opportunity. His dad is bedridden, and he's not going to do much about it. So I'm going to take this opportunity, and he gets this little scheme where he basically begins to have this ceremony as if he has been made king, to make people believe it, maybe, to get people to follow after him. And he ends up getting some of David's friends to come along with him in this scheme. Of course, Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan hear about this, they know about it, and they go to David, they speak to him, and they convince him to do something about it. He ends up making Solomon king. Bad news for Adonijah, because he just tried to take the kingship for himself, and now his brother, who was rightfully supposed to be king, has been made king. He realizes the gig is up. What does he do? He runs into the temple. He grabs hold, it's sort of like the safe place if you're playing tag. You can't get me in here, right? Takes hold of the altar, and of course, we see Solomon. He could have very easily just wanted to carry out vengeance. He could have said, I'm going to go in there and drag this guy out and let's just chop his head off in the street or whatever, stone him to death. But we see, I think, the beginning of some wisdom here from Solomon. He says, as long as you show yourself to be a worthy man, then you don't have anything to worry about. He doesn't seek revenge on his brother here. He sends him home. And so it's interesting just to see that part of Solomon right here from the very beginning. What can we take from this chapter? Well, first of all, I think we see the truth of God, the judgment of God, in a sense, still on David. There's still that judgment there that he said was going to happen because of the sin of David. But we also see the mercy of God and the fact that God is continuing David's line, and he's continuing him through Solomon. Remember, Solomon was the child of Bathsheba, the one who the wife that he stole for himself. And so I think it's extremely merciful of God that he chooses Solomon to carry on this lineage, and sort of for David and for the Jewish people a sign of God's mercy. So even though we see the judgment of God in this chapter, we also see the mercy of God and the wisdom of Solomon here at the end. I think as we continue to go through this book, it's a good thing for us to pray, God, help me to see how you are moving through this story. We see the movement of the characters. We see what they're doing, whether for good or bad, whether they're seeking God or not. But Lord God, help me to see your sovereignty. And I think that's really what stands out to me in this chapter. This guy, this son of David, Adonijah, or whatever his name is, he had a plan. Bathsheba, Nathan, even David, they all had a plan and they all acted in a certain way. But we see the sovereignty of God. He's in control. He's made promises, and He's going to carry them out. And so it gives us opportunity just to worship Him for who He is, and to help us to fall in line with His will, which some of these characters should have been seeking to do more. God, help me to fall in line with what You want and what You're doing, instead of trying to seek for our own will to be accomplished. All right, God bless you guys.